You're listening to Nostalgia, July 5th, 2021.
Nostalgia is a member of the Mice Chat Podcast Network.
Hang on to them hats and glasses, cause this here's the wildest podcast in the wilderness.
This is Mousetalgia.
Carpe Kingdom, seize the magic.
Welcome to Mousetalgia, your podcast all about Disneyland, Disney California Adventure, and everything else Disney. I'm your host, Dave, and with us today we have Jeff.
Hello, everybody.
Kristen.
Hey, friends.
And you never know if Becky's going to stop by, but we can cross our fingers and hope for some pixie dust.
She's like a mystery wrapped in a burrito.
An enigmatic burrito. It is Taco Tuesday.
Is it every Tuesday Taco Tuesday?
But it's not Burrito Tuesday, so.
Yeah. Burritos every other day. All right, so today we're going to start off with a Mousetalgia Roundup.
Get ready, folks, for the weekly Mousetalgia Roundup.
And today's roundup actually comes from one of our friends and listeners. And Kristen, what do we have?
So this comes from Amy over at Amy Small World. If you have not gone to her site, you should check out Amy Small World either on her website or Etsy. She makes really great products, primarily different types of Disney-themed travel bags and other types of bags too. So go check her out. But she has a great question I thought we can answer for her. So she writes in and she says, I have an unusual Disney question I would appreciate your perspective on. The specifics of this question is for Disney World, but I think it can be easily applied to Disneyland. We are planning a Disney World trip for this December. It will be myself, my husband, our son, he'll be 13 months old during the trip, as well as my husband, sister, her husband, their daughters, their daughter's 14, their son's 11. Unfortunately, I still have quite a bit of baby weight to lose after the rest of the group has packed on some pounds during our time in quarantine. We feel you, Amy. We are hoping to do a family step challenge to get into good walking shape for Disney World. And I was hoping you could help us with an idea for a prize/bet to see which family could walk the most before we leave. Personally, I would like a bet where the loser has to do something awful or embarrassing, like wear an embarrassing outfit to dinner or do some sort of a TikTok dance in public or drink an entire glass of Beverly. Others, I don't know what Beverly is, but it must be bad.
Oh, yeah.
Others were thinking of doing, is it bad, Dave?
Well,
what is
it? It's one of the drinks from Club Cool in Epcot. It's, I think, Italian. It's kind of, I feel like a club soda-y-ish type thing, but it's generally considered to be the worst flavor that was available there. Worst one. And often used for pranks and shenanigans, that's for sure.
What if your name was Beverly? You'd feel really bad having the worst drink in the world named after you. Sorry, Beverly's out there. Okay, she continues. Others were thinking of doing something less humiliating, like the winner's getting to pick where we eat a special dinner for the last full day of the trip. The last option is doing a collaborative goal, like as an extended family. We walk 1,000,000 steps for our trip. If we do, we have some sort of special experience as a family, which I think would be difficult with a baby. I'd appreciate any suggestions to help motivate us as a family to get into good walking shape before Disney World. Carpe Kingdom, Amy. What's that prize, you guys?
I don't know. Amy, listen. Collaborative goals, that doesn't work. Like, competition is what works. Yeah, so you gotta fight it out.
Plus, as a baby, because then someone will choose, like, let's stay up until 10 and have fireworks. Like, no baby can stay up that late.
No baby can stay up that late. But I'm having a hard time, though, coming up with, well, first of all, I don't know Disney World. It sounds like we're focused on Disney World, and I don't know. Just staying outside is torture enough for me at Disney World, so I'm not really...
But they're going to go in November, right?
That's right.
So December.
Maybe it will
be... It won't be that bad.
Manageable,
it might be rainy, actually.
Manageable, yeah. So, I don't know. You guys kind of chime in here a little bit.
I have a good one. Do you want me to start?
Yeah,
circle back to you? Okay, I'm going to inspire you guys. So I thought, because I read this one yesterday and I thought about it. So I think it should be a prize in advance. So you're going to have to set a deadline. And you guys have a while, right? Like, it's not for many months from now. So I think a month before you guys leave, whoever has won or done the most steps should get to choose the family t-shirt for the trip. Because I'm all about family t-shirts at this point. Like, we did one on our last Walt Disney World trip, and it wasn't custom or anything. We just went to, like, the World of Disney and Disney Springs and picked out one. But it was so fun. Like, we all had, and they weren't even all matching, because I think we couldn't find the same size. Like, this is the way you shouldn't do it when you get there. You should do it in advance. But we all got Disney World t-shirts, and then on the last day, we had a great castle photo, and it was, you know, it was a really fun thing to do. So I think whoever wins should get to pick either the family t-shirt, like sometimes people get them with, you know, your name in advance. You could do that. Or just day one when you get there, they should get to pick it and everybody else has to chip in and pay so they don't have to pay for their own. That's my idea. Are you guys inspired?
I like it.
Okay, Dave, inspire Jeff. What are you going to do?
You get a kitchen sink at Beaches and Cream.
Like they had to pay for it for you?
Well, you just get one. Yeah, everybody else chips in to buy one for you. And that's...
Dave, I like that, but here's my question. If the goal is to lose weight and get in shape, should you be celebrating with ice cream?
Yes. The answer is always yes. Pretty sure. It's a reward. It's not like you should be having this every night. Or I guess, you know, maybe you share some of it with other people. I'm likely not going to eat the whole thing anyways.
They might. If they've been doing all those steps, they've worked up an appetite.
I mean, it seems like a good reward. I don't know. That's just
I like it.
Yeah.
It just was a question.
Yeah. I understand the conundrum there. I understand.
Yeah.
Yeah. I it sounds good to me, Dave. I don't know. Like if it was Disneyland, I'd be all over like, oh, Bengal barbecue or, you know, the churro chop. I'd come up with something. You're going to do that
anyways. So what kind of reward is that?
Yeah.
Well, right? But, I mean, you figure out a way to make, Bengal barbecue is always a reward. Like you could tell me even whether or not I plan to go there, the first thing at Disneyland, you could tell me if you do this for me, the first thing we'll do when we go to Disneyland is go to Bengal barbecue. I would do anything. Just because
remember that, Dave. It's all we have to say.
That's absolutely a fact. I would climb any mountain, swim any stream. However, I just don't know. I literally don't know. I don't know Disney World. I haven't taken the time and effort to get to know my...
Well, think of something outside the park. Like a t-shirt.
I'm sorry, Amy. I'm not the one to turn to for this. But you have two very good ideas here. And my contribution is drop the collaborative effort that in my opinion, not going to work. You gotta fight it out. So,
yeah. Maybe if they haven't, I know where they're standing. So maybe if they hadn't like already booked their hotel, they could chip in for have like a special hotel room. But I know they're all doing something else. So never mind. Better just go with the t-shirt.
T-shirts work.
T-shirts it is. Let us know what you do, though. I want to know.
Yeah.
And who wins? Amy, you got this. I believe in you.
Yep. All right. Today, we want to thank our sponsor, MEI Mouse Fan Travel. They are a fee-free travel agency. That means that Disney pays them, not you. And, of course, if you ever need a travel agent, now is that time. So go to mousefantravel.com and get your no-obligation quote.
Leave today to hear a podcast from the world of yesterday, tomorrow, and fantasy. Nostalgia.
Carpe Kingdom, seize the magic.
All right, today we have a very magical guest with us, someone who has been through so many different parts of the creative process with Disney.
Yeah, that's right. We're going to talk with Ethan Reed. So we've talked to a lot of Imagineers on the show before, right? I mean, some Disney legends, some Imagineers that have worked on some attractions that you're very familiar with, Imagineers that have worked on just like the details of attractions that might be behind the scenes stories. It's interesting talking to Ethan because he's so, the responsibilities he's had are so varied, right? So sometimes he's working on products that you would purchase, and sometimes he's working on character designs or, you know, storyboarding for various attractions. So I really enjoyed having our conversation with Ethan because he really gives you a good look at what does it mean to be an Imagineer? Like what actually happens? You know, I feel like I've often asked Imagineers, so I just want to know, like, what's a day look like? Like what actually happens? And sometimes it's difficult for them to answer, but Ethan had a good way of saying like, well, this is what happened this day. And he kind of explains what actually is going on there. So let's just dive into this conversation with former Imagineer Ethan Reed. All right. So, up next, we're going to speak with Ethan Reed. So Ethan has done I don't even know exactly how to describe the number of different projects and types of activities Ethan's been involved with the Walt Disney Company. So we're going to just kind of take this interview. We're going to take it by storm. We're going to dive in there, ask Ethan some questions. You're going to get a feel for all the different things, that he's been, involved with at so many different parks. It's just amazing. Ethan, thank you so much for joining us on Mousetalgia today.
Well, thanks for having me, Jeff and Dave.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, Kristen was, also talking to us about your work, and we kind of were going over your history with the Disney Company, all these different things you've done. I mean, it's really difficult to know even how to kind of tackle an interview like this. But if we go back way to the beginning, we all have an origin story, right? Let's tie Marvel in here and bring in an origin story for you. So, like before you became an Imagineer, were you a Disney kid? How did you become both a Disney, person, I guess a fan or an expert in Disney, and then an Imagineer?
I think it really started with, I guess I was a Disney kid, and it started with my parents, right? My parents, they grew up in they were, baby boomers, right? They grew up in the 1950s. They remembered watching the Mickey Mouse Club. They both lived on different coasts. My dad grew up in the Bronx. My mother grew up in San Francisco Bay Area. My father has very fond memories of going to Freedom Land, USA, and has fond memories of going to the 1964 World's Fair. And my mom, her father was in the military. They did a lot of traveling. They spent a lot of time in Japan, and they were from San Francisco. But when my parents met, neither of them had been to Disneyland, but they'd grown up watching the Mickey Mouse Club, and they both distinctly remember watching Disneyland open, right? Like that.
Wow. Yeah.
So when they got married, which just so happens to be 47 years ago yesterday.
Awesome.
So happy anniversary to my parents. They did their honeymoon at Disneyland. Neither of them had ever been. So Disneyland was like part of them, and it was part of their relationship. And, they had my sister, they had me, and it was just something we did. It was like, we lived in the San Francisco Bay Area. We'd go down when I was younger, we'd go down every other year, right? We'd plan our family, driving trip in the family truckster. And we'd always stop at Disneyland on the way home. And it was always the highlight of the trip. And then I think, my parents would always throw like big birthday parties and stuff for us. And then my sister got a little bit older, and she's like, can we just take all that money from the birthday party and plan a trip to Disneyland? So then we started going every year. And my sister's birthday just so happened to be the same date as Martin Luther King's birthday. So Martin Luther King weekend, became a thing, in the 1980s. Thanks to, Ronald Reagan made that a law, right? The federal holiday. And we just started, making our annual trek down to Disneyland. And I just loved it. And, I know, Jeff, you're a big Haunted Mansion fan. I was afraid of the Haunted Mansion. And it was so funny. My mom actually has this journal, right? And this journal, she wrote, it was like a baby journal, and it was my dad had to do business or something for work, and I think he was working. He had a contract with Disneyland. He was selling lifts or something for maintenance, and he anyway, we were staying at the Disneyland Hotel in the Bonita Tower. It was brand new, and we stayed there for 2 or 3 weeks. Right.
Wow.
And, awesome. Right. And I found this journal that my mom had, and it's we did the paddle boats, and, we saw the characters at the park, and, it was ticket systems at that point still. Right. And it was just, really cool, growing up with, a household of Disney fans. But I guess in this journal, back to the Haunted Mansion, I think it was the first attraction I went on was America Sings, which totally makes sense, right? And then there was an entry in there that we got stuck in the graveyard scene in the Haunted Mansion, right? And I loved it. My mom was like, "Oh, Ethan," I was like, I don't know, 2 or something. I'm like, I was just like, "Oh, wow, look at this. There's like things popping up at me. There's a mummy over there." And I thought, it was cool. And so growing up, so when I was small, I think I liked Haunted Mansion, but by the time I was like 9, I was just like, "Oh no, I'm not going on that." And I remember like waiting outside, like my parents would, this was before child swap, right? Kids today, I don't know how easy they have it, right? And it's like the parents would have to like split up, and like the scared kid, me, would have to wait outside. And I finally like got the nerve up and, went on it. But I mean, I think one trip I was so freaked out, like skeletons like got to me for some reason. So it's like I like Pirates of the Caribbean, I kept my eyes closed throughout the whole the tunnels, right? And Jungle Cruise, like they used to have stacks of skulls or they had like skulls on sticks. I think they still have them in Adventureland, and it's like those would freak me out. And I think New Fantasyland had just opened, and we went on Snow White's Scary Adventure, and there's skulls, right? All on the architecture. It's like, so, I think I think Kim Irvine and her team finally got rid of those skulls. I have not been down to see it, but the photos, it looks like they're gone. So, 9-year-old Ethan is very happy.
That's amazing. There's so many similarities to my own origin story. That's kind of cool to hear. I also was kind of scared of the Haunted Mansion. I didn't go on it till I was probably similar, like, I don't know, maybe double digits, 10 or 11. Partly it was because I had the Haunted Mansion record. So I knew the story and I loved the record. I listened to it all the time, but I just knew like, I don't need to see that in real. Like I was still young enough, to think like, I don't really know that I want to actually experience this with real things around me. So that's interesting. Yeah. That's cool. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, so I was, definitely in a Disney household, and like 1984 was Donald Duck's 50th birthday. Clarence Nash got the a Special Academy Award for, performing, Donald's voice for 50 years. So I'm watching the Academy Awards. I was probably like, 8, 9 years old, around that same time period. And he starts talking, Clarence Nash starts talking like Donald Duck. And I was like amazed that this, this guy could like speak like Donald Duck. And I just started picking it up. So I started going, and I was just like, I just picked up on it. I watched what he did. I'm like, I can do that. And then all through elementary school, I just, sit in class and go, I just like have a good time being Donald. And I learned to start forming words. So I could do the Gettysburg Address as Donald Duck. 7 years ago. Right. I mean, all that stuff. And that's what I enjoyed doing. And my grades started to suffer. So my father took me aside and he's like, son, what are you going to do when you grow up? I'm like, I want to be the voice of Donald Duck. And he's like, well, Clarence Nash has passed away, and the guy who's the voice of Donald Duck now, Tony Anselmo, he is an animator. So he has something to fall back on. What are you going to do to fall back on? Like, I guess I'll be an animator. So I totally got into animation. My parents had purchased a hardback version of The Illusion of Life signed by Frank.
Wow.
Right. It was just in the house. Right. And I remember pulling it out and looking at it, and I fell in love with Mark Davis. I loved his artwork. I loved his stuff. And then as you got further in the book, you got to the back, and it was like New Frontiers in Animation. It was like the art of audiometronics. And it was all about Mark Davis, and Mark Davis talking about how, the way to design a good animatronic is by doing a good storyboard drawing. It's all about story. And, and I just loved that and was just entranced by it. So I wanted to be Mark Davis when I grew up, but, it was the, early 90s, a couple of years later. And then I'm watching Disney Channel. You've got Marty Sklar talking about WDI. You've got, Dave Feighton, who, did tons of animation for the American Adventure. And, he was the animatronic guru for years. And I remember watching footage of Dave Feighton animating Country Bear Jamboree on one of these Disney Channel interstitials. And I just remember sitting there watching it and wow, that looks so complicated. Like, you got this console with all these blinking lights. I'm like, man, that's like some serious Star Trek stuff. So, I never dreamed in a million years that I'd be able to do anything that technologically advanced. You guys saw, me trying to set up my speakers. So it was, that's kind of how it began.
Yeah. Very cool. So you've done so many amazing things. And had so many different hats. Like you've been a character designer, a product designer, a creative director, and that's just some of the things that you've done. And so we always love to hear how people started their careers like at Imagineering. Everybody has their own story, and everybody always wants to know, how do I become an Imagineering? It seems like there's a lot of luck and a lot of magic, and it kind of falls together to actually happen. So can you tell us a little bit about kind of that journey of starting at Imagineering and kind of what some of your early projects were?
Yeah. So, I went to San Francisco State University in San Francisco, obviously. And I studied animation there. And it was great. It was a great time to be at San Francisco because you had Skellington Productions working on James and Giant Peach. You had Pixar just starting. Half my friends were at Skellington. The other half were interns at Pixar. So I got to hang out around those people. Joe Ranft, from Pixar, he would come. He came by once and gave us a whole story class at San Francisco State, and he was just the nicest guy. And he shared these notes with us, and he was just a lovely person. And it's all that stuff was, made an impact on me. But I really wanted to go to Cal Arts. So I got into Cal Arts, and I'm not kidding you, within the first week, WDI, all of Disney showed up, and they were like, hey, yes, we want you guys to come work for us. Because back then, this was 1996. So it was 2 years after The Lion King. It was super hard to get into Cal Arts, and people were just getting plucked, and I wanted to graduate and finish that degree. And it was just funny because I remember getting the postcard from the recruiting table for Imagineering, and it was this beautiful Sleeping Beauty Castle illustration by Tom Morris. And I'm like, oh, that's so beautiful. I hope I can draw like that someday. And, I kept that. I think I pinned that one up on the dorm room wall. And, but, it's I talked to feature animation, I talked to TV animation, I talked to consumer products, and it's all Disney. It's all fun, right? And so what ended up happening was that first year, they came by looking for interns to learn how to start animating automatronic figures. And I didn't get selected that year. And then they came back the next year, and I talked to them, and they brought me in for what was called a 3-day test. Okay. Mm-hmm. And the 3-day test was you were brought to the Tahunga facility in North Hollywood, California, and you were sat down in front of a A100 figure, which is the Wicked Witch from the Great Movie Ride, if you remember that figure. Very dynamic figure. Had a piece of technology in it called Compliance. And so you had to sit down, and you had a CD. It was called Pieces of 8, and you had to pick a piece of park audio. So I picked the Wicked Witch because I had not been on the Great Movie Ride yet. And so I'd been to Disneyland so much. I was an annual pass holder, so I didn't want to replicate what I saw on the auctioneer, right? Or replicate what I saw on the ship captain. And I just seen The Wizard of Oz. They had just re-released it, and I'd gone to the Grauman's Chinese Theater and the real one, and see The Wizard of Oz, and just loved Margaret Hamilton's performance, and I just animated that. And they asked me to start coming in 2 days a week, and I just started coming in 2 days a week when I was at Cal Arts, and then I was having just a great time. I got to meet Mark Davis and Alice Davis, had lunch with them, brought in a giant stack of books to Mark and Alice, and he signed all of them. It was very lovely of him. He reviewed some of my animation that I was doing in the training lab on the figures, which was super cool. Wow. And, it was great. It was a really fun time. And, all around me at the Tahunga building, they were building Tokyo Disney Sea. Sinbad figures, Indiana Jones figures. You have Indy, on the rope hanging like in the middle of a bay, and it's like, oh, that's cool, right? It's so fun, and there at the time at Tahunga, there was not enough parking. There were so many people working at Imagineering's production facility that we were like parking in the streets. We were people would get there super early to make sure they got a spot. We started double parking cars. We should have had valets, really. Wow. But yeah, it was a really cool time to start at Imagineering, and I'm really happy that I didn't start at 1401 because that's where meetings happen. Like, really, it's like I really liked being in production. Seeing where the magic is made, and it's so funny. The slogan for Imagineering is "We make the magic," right? And I'm grateful that I got to start at Tahunga, right, at the production facility where the magic was actually made.
Yeah. Wow. That's awesome. We're going to ask you at least about some of that magic stuff. But before that, we have to get pretty specific here on behalf of Kristen. So, to be spoiler alert, a number of these questions are on behalf of Kristen, because she's the one of us that has been overseas, and we know a lot of the things you've been involved with have been overseas parks. She is just in love with those parks, so she gave us a list like, don't forget to mention this, don't forget to mention this. So before we talk about some of those attractions, we really should probably stop and talk about Duffy, because Duffy's been, it's, how do I even approach this? We know that you've designed some of Duffy's friends. You actually designed Stella Lou, right? Yes. And Cookie Ann, and you've been a creative director and involved heavily with the Duffy and Friends franchise. So we want to hear about that, and we also kind of want to know, like, Kristen has described the mania about Duffy that she has witnessed overseas. Mm-hmm. And Dave and I can describe the kind of like, oh, there's Duffy on the wharf at California Adventure. Yeah. Let's just keep walking.
I've got several Duffys though here at the house.
Okay. So that's fair. So Dave's daughter was captivated by Duffy. Yes. So, but kind of a mixed reaction here, right? So maybe you can just tell us your Duffy story, a little bit about how you were involved and Yeah,
it's funny, Jeff, because, my introduction to Duffy was very much like yours, right? It was, I'm a California, I think I was at California Adventure working on Mermaid, right? And, had lunch over at the, Triton's, whatever the bar is called there. I was not drinking. I mean, water, yes, but I was not having, a martini lunch. But I was, having lunch with a team member, and I saw Duffy. I'm like, oh, that's cute. And I hadn't been to Japan for a while. It's like, in my career, it seemed like I would go to Japan for a lot, right? So it's like TDS, I was there, for weeks, and then I came back and I didn't go there for 4 years, right? Yeah. And then I was there and that was cool, and then I didn't go back for another 4 years, and then I was there for 2 years solid almost, and then right. So I didn't, so when Duffy became the thing in Japan, I think that's when Disney parks in the US were like, hey, we need to do something with Duffy. So I think that's why you started seeing that whole store that was across from what's now the Pixar restaurant, Lamplight. And it was cool. And my kids were small and they loved Duffy. And one of the great things, it was, hey, there's no line and you can go meet this character. And there was no line because nobody knew who this guy was. Right. Nobody. But you would see some really excited, Japanese guests, right? Mm-hmm. And because they knew who he was, and they were like, their mind must have been blown. It's like, this is the best park on the planet because I can just walk up and meet Duffy as many times as I want in a day. Yeah, I don't care that most of this park I could do without because I've got Tokyo Disney Sea in my backyard, right? Yeah, right. But Duffy with no line, that's worth a lot. So I mean, that's worth a plane flight. So yeah, for me, I didn't. Joe Lance Cicero, he was got a Disney legend in my book. I mean, he worked at in the animation studios all the way through Oliver and Company, and then he came over to Imagineering. and did Splash Mountain for Tokyo, did Toontown for Disneyland and Tokyo, and he took over the Tokyo portfolio, and he was my mentor. And I love Joe, and he was the guy who came up with the Duffy story. He and a writer named Scott Hennessy. And Scott Hennessy also wrote Kitchen Cabaret.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So Mr. Veggie, Fruit. And, the guy who brought us Toontown, they came up with the story for Duffy, the Disney bear. But Duffy, the Disney bear, goes back even further. The design of Duffy goes back further to the Once Upon a toy shop at downtown Disney in Florida. It was designed by a very talented designer at the Consumer Products Group in Florida named Cody Reynolds. And Cody designed the Disney bear. And there was a little story that went with the Disney bear, and it had something to do with like Tinkerbell sprinkling Mickey's teddy bear with magic, and he came to life. I think they even did a whole golden book or something that they sold in the park for a brief amount of time. And, I think it did okay. And then they started doing, different colored Duffies. There was a pink one, there was a purple one. Then they just made so many different Disney bears. And to me, they oversaturated the market. You couldn't give the things away. And meanwhile, you have the Oriental Land Company working with Joe Lancicero and the team in Tokyo, cultivating this thing, like creating a story, creating, an actual backstory that Minnie created this for, Mickey when he went on his travels. Right. And I think because you had that story with heart and he was a cute bear, the Japanese guests took to him and it became like their own. And it just, there was also a story, I guess there was a very, famous Japanese ice skater. And at the end of one of her performances, people were like throwing roses down on the ice. Someone threw a Duffy bear down on the ice, and she scooped that Duffy bear up and hugged it. And it was like front page news everywhere in Japan, right? Not because it was Duffy, but because this famous, ice skater had, taken this photo, and then, people all across Japan sees this national hero holding this cute teddy bear. Well, where's that teddy bear from? Oh, it's from Tokyo Disney Sea, right? And you can only get it in this one shop, right? You couldn't get it in multiple shops. You could just get it at Aunt Peg's shop in American Waterfront, right? With the Cape Cod region. And, it's like, and like this little hidden gem of a location of the park. And, not many people went over there. And then Duffy moved in and just into the store, and he just took off, and he was doing really well. I remember being in Japan working on Monsters with Joe, and he was showing me some sketches that very talented designer Mark Page, who worked at Imagineering, had done for Shelley May, which is the girl bear in the Duffy and Friends universe. And she did really well. And there was a little seagull that came out that did okay. His name was Tippy Blue, and but Duffy was huge. And I finished up Mystic Manor in 2013 in like April, and I was out there on a long business trip. I returned home, and Daniel Ju, who had taken over the Tokyo portfolio at WDI from Joe Lancicero, he asked me to come to a meeting to help brainstorm new friends for Duffy. And I'm like, oh, okay. And I talked to my kids that night. Hey, kids, you remember Duffy over at DCA? Like, oh, yeah, we remember Duffy at DCA. And they all had their Duffy bears, right? And I swear to God, I talked to my son like that first night after Daniel invited me to the meeting. I'm like, hey, if Duffy was going to have a friend, what kind of friend would he have? And my son said, oh, he'd have a puppy dog, right? Because, my son was in kindergarten and he loved dogs, right? I think his theme in his room was 101 Dalmatians at the time, right? And he also wanted to be a chef at the time. So I asked him, like, well, what special, like, what special power, like what thing does this character do? And he's like, oh, this dog is a chef. Like, okay. So I asked my kindergartner, I'm like, so what is what's this dog's name? It's Pancakes. I'm like, okay. So that night, Pancakes was sketched up. I go to the meeting the next day, and we're all talking, in the room, and the way that it, kind of turned into, like, at Imagineering is like, a brainstorm. You'd have like a bunch of people in a room, and you have a lot of people who can't draw, and they're just like writing down, things on Sharpies and, pinning it up. And not me. You always know when Ethan is in a brainstorm at Imagineering because there's drawings on the board.
Awesome.
Because, it's like I went to animation school. I know how to storyboard. So I have my Sharpies out there. It's like, these note cards are called storyboards, not word boards. Right? Mark Davis and Albertino did not design Country Bear Jamboree with, words on a board. They did it with drawings. So anyway, I digress. So, I did these like, fun sketches, and, like, oh, look, here's Pancakes the dog. And we're just having a great time in this room, with the writers. And, please write all your stuff on they write wonderful stories. Like Charlie Watanabe was in the room, good friend and, partner in crime on, not crime, on Nothing Friends. And, Scott Hennessy was definitely in there. And, we just came up with, Stella Lou was born in these meetings. Cookie Ann was born in these meetings. Pancakes became Cookie Ann. Olu, Gelatoni, all those characters had their start in like a few days in this brainstorm, right? And it was fun. It was just super fun. And I had never really done product design. I had when we were working on Mystic Manor, I met with the merchandise teams because I designed that entire cast of characters, right? And I'd sat down with them and reviewed the plush samples and things like that, and looked at some stuff. Didn't get to see everything. I wish I had seen more of it, to be honest, because like some of the initial T-shirts that came out, I'm like, that's off model, but I still bought them because it's my character. But still, anyhow, so it was super fun, like getting to work with the merchandise teams. I'd never done that before. And, especially the team at OLC that does merchandise. I mean, OLC, like their merchandise team is like, I think one of the best, like in any park anywhere. It's like, I've seen it on like Instagram lately. There's like the Happy Oysters from Alice in Wonderland, right? And it's like, I love the Curious Oysters, that whole section, right? And I always thought the oysters were cute, but they take a character, like it's a minor character from this film. Yeah. Take it and they just know how to build a brand about it and just like make it successful, right? Yeah. And and then they did that with Gelatoni, and they did that with Stella Lou, and and then we developed Cookie Ann with Hong Kong, and developed Olu with Alani, and then we all became a big giant Duffy, family, like a franchise family, and we'd go visit, Hong Kong one year, we'd go visit Japan one year. We were hoping to go to Alani, and then COVID happened. So, but anyhow, I just love working on Duffy and Friends, and it became like the highlight of everything I did at Imagineering at the end.
Wow. That's really cool. One of the other things that Kristen wanted to make sure we talked to you about was Camp Woodchuck in Tokyo Disneyland. Now, according to her, this was one of her favorite areas in the park and one of the places they just kept going back to. And apparently some of it was because there's chicken and waffle sandwich there that's really good, but also just there's like a really high level of detail in that area. And can you take us through kind of the process of designing an area like that, and where you, were you a Huey, Dewey, and Louie fan, or how do you make the decisions about all that and kind of pull that all together? So I'd love to just hear about Camp Woodchuck.
Yeah, so Camp Woodchuck, I was, I cannot take the credit as the art director. All that credit goes to Matt Abiva, who's a very talented, art director at Walt Disney Imagineering. And also Kelly Ford, he was the art director. He was one of the art directors on Splash Mountain in Tokyo, Toy Story Mania in Tokyo. I mean, Kelly like is an Imagineering like veteran, and he's retired, and Matt is still there, and it is, you know, the two of them really put that together. Matt really was the creative force behind it, and he knew I was a fan. He needed someone to do, you know, artwork, and we had a great writer, Tom Child, and we also had, we had a great team, and, you know, great graphics team. And I was brought in to help create all the character art. So if you go to Camp Woodchuck, there's just tons of character art all around the land. And, you know, there's like this big postcard that like welcomes you, and, you know, it has Humphrey the Bear on it. I love Humphrey the Bear. Humphrey the Bear is one of my J. Audubon Woodlore, Humphrey the Bear. Those are some of my favorite cartoons. And, you know, getting to make sure that he had a presence in the park, right? In a park like Tokyo, where, hey, you know, this Humphrey thing, he's cute. Maybe we can, you know, do a whole merchandise thing around him, right? And it's like when I add little, you know, hidden characters that people really don't know, right, into this stuff, I hope that it, like, you know, gets a life of its own, that it, like, you know, takes off like Duffy. And so yeah, added Humphrey stuff in there, and I'm a huge Carl Barks fan. Huge Don Rosa fan. If you guys are familiar with Don Rosa, you know, he wrote, I think, one of the greatest comic books of all time, The Life and Times of Scrooge McDuck. I do not know why the company has not made that into a feature film or a series for Disney Plus. But I would totally, like, you know, pay my $6.99 a month, you know, to watch that. Or is it $7.99 now? I don't remember. Anyhow. So yeah, I just love, you know, I grew up watching DuckTales and and, you know, Gladstone comics. Do you guys remember Gladstone comic?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I was in Florida the first time I got a Gladstone comic, and it was, you know, they had Uncle Scrooge Adventures #1. We were staying at the Howard Johnson's, which is now, I think, the Holiday Inn in downtown Disney, and or Disney Village as it was called in the day. Right. And, you know, it was 75 cents, and it was like on one of those cool spinning racks. And, you know, my dad's like, oh, wow, Disney comics are back. I'm like, oh, that's cool. I'll buy this. And, you know, I read it on the plane, and I loved it. And then every time I went to the grocery store, I'd get those, you know, the Gladstone comics with all the reprints of Carl Barks, and then all the new Don Rosa stories. So I really enjoy that. I still enjoy that stuff. And, you know, I wanted to get a dose of that into the parks, because I don't think we've ever really done it, right? I mean, I think there was that there was a sculpture in Mickey's Toontown Fair of what was that name? It was like he was like the guy the founder of Duckburg. It was like, I don't even remember his name. I'd have to look it up. But like total like rare character. But they had a sculpture of him in Walt Disney World. And Cornelius Coote was his name. He was the founder of Duckburg. And, you know, it's like, so that was like the only thing I'd ever seen that was a direct thing to the comic books. So like we have all kinds of stuff hidden in the artwork throughout Camp Woodchuck. And just like, I mean, it's a restaurant, really. I mean, it was a restaurant that existed, but then they built this new building, this new structure. It's a beautiful place to like watch the fireworks from. You know, you get the Mark Twain riverboat going by at night, and it's just really, it's a beautiful location. And, you know, maybe they can, you know, do weddings there. I don't know.
Yeah, you know, I got to tell you, Kristen has this guest room, her trick or treat guest room. I've stayed in it a couple times. I don't know. She recently moved. I don't know if she redid it, but she has all this vintage trick or treat stuff. And the centerpiece is she had purchased a cell of, I think, of Huey, Dewey, and Louie. I don't remember if it's a set of cells but then she found like the same animation drawings that went with it. Just this amazing room. Her collection is pretty amazing.
Oh, like Trick or Treat, like the Bill Justice short.
Yeah, the short. I'm sorry. Oh, yeah, the Trick or Treat. I should have clarified. So yeah, so Huey, Dewey, and Louie are kind of some of her favorites too. You know, well, let's talk about something, you have had a little more direct design and influence on. And this is probably something a little more interesting to me, the Doom Buggies guy. So, well, let's talk about Mystic Manor a little bit, in Hong Kong Disneyland. So You mentioned before you designed all the characters. Like, boy, do I want to hear about that. The Albert is just a fascinating character, right? I mean, it's such a quintessential Disney kind of character. This little monkey that causes everything, everything. And so I'd love to hear about that. I'd also love to hear your take. So Jason Sorrell I don't know if it was his decision or not, but recently they redid his Haunted Mansion book and inserted Mystic Manor instead of the movie stuff. So Mystic Manor now has a chapter in the Haunted Mansion, Disney's official Haunted Mansion book. And I'd be curious to have your personal take on that. Like, do you fit Mystic Manor into the category of scary, dark ride Haunted Mansion, or do you maybe have something different in mind? So if you can just kind of talk to us about Mystic Manor.
I'll answer that question. The Jason Sorrell book question. I mean, I think, I bought the first, I bought both versions, right? Yeah. I bought the second version because, artwork by me in it, right? But, the first version, it's like, there's a Haunted Mansion book, right? It's like, I'd go to, there's a shop in Burbank called Creature Features.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. And I would buy my e-ticket magazines there. And there was a book that was it was a Pirates of the Caribbean book. It looked like it was just totally printed,
Yeah. Requests Haunted Pirates of the Caribbean theme park adventure. Yeah.
That one. I love that book. And I bought all that stuff when I first started at Imagineering. Right. And, when I was interning, and, I would just devour all that stuff, and I loved it so much. So, of course, when Jason's book came out, it's like, of course I'm gonna buy this, the one with the movie, and I was very excited about learning more about that movie. I should watch it again. I haven't watched it in a very long time. I think I watched it when it first came out, and didn't want to watch it again. But it's on Disney Plus. I'll give it a whirl. It's not the Haunted Mansion, but Haunted Mansion is such a strong brand for Disney parks. If you're going to tell the story of Mystic Manor, right? I think it was a smart thing to tie it to the Haunted Mansion book, because here in the US, I don't think from a publishing side, from the business side, you would have ever gotten a making of Mystic Manor.
Sure.
Right. Maybe in Hong Kong, but not in the US. So, I equate it to Jason's other book, like The Disney Mountains. Right.
Yeah.
So it's not a Haunted Mansion. It is a dark ride, not based on a film IP.
Okay.
How's that?
That's cool. That's a good.
But I don't know if they could have marketed, dark rides not based on, classic Disney.
Well, that's okay. So that explains that. So tell us a little bit about how did you go about creating these characters? I mean, tell us a little bit about the development story here.
It's a team effort, and it's I mentioned Joe Lancicero. Joe Lancicero was the overall creative guy over Mystic Manor, and Robert Coltrane. And, he was the guy who laid out all of Mystic Manor, came up with the initial stuff. Michael Sprout, who was a former Audiometronics animator, did a lot of Epcot stuff, a lot of Tokyo Disneyland stuff, but was also a writer. He wrote Tower of Terror, right? Mm-hmm. And he wrote Mystic Manor, and the initial script. But, like everything at Imagineering, all good things, they don't stay as one thing. If you... these projects take a long time. If you start with something and you just lock into it and you don't learn in the process and improve things, even if you have budget constraints, I think sometimes budget constraints are our friends, right? And you just have to, you have to just keep developing it. And it's like what they do at Pixar. You plus the movie, right? You just keep working on it until it's just right. So, Mystic Manor, I mean, it started in, 2008 is when I first got involved, and I was working on Mr. Potato Head. And, Robert Coltrane came up to me. We were doing a big dog and pony show showing off Mr. Potato Head to a bunch of people. And it was, he was actually pulling his ear off. We'd finally gotten it working. And it should have been an electric figure. They're all electric now, thank God. Okay. But it was really, he came up and was like, Ethan, I've been trying to get you to work on, we've got all this stuff for Hong Kong, which was Grizzly Gulch, which was, Mystic Manor. And I was like, Ethan, I hear you're so busy. I'm like, yeah, because I was working so much animating Don Rickles dialogue, which I loved. But after a time, it's like I did it for months, like 6 months. Wow. And, because he's interactive. There's so much stuff. We had more animators, or probably just as many animators animating Mr. Potato Head as we had on all of Sinbad.
Wow.
Because there's that much footage, right?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
Complex figure. He has like over 30 functions. And, the Sinbad, we had 100 figures, but 100 figures doing a minute of dialogue compared to Mr. Potato Head doing, what was it? I think we have like 25, 30 minutes of.
Wow.
Right? So it's not a small task.
Yeah.
And they all had to work together to be, interactive. So it was like this big puzzle. And so being able to step away from that and start developing stuff for Grizzly Gulch and Mystic Manor was a save. I mean, it was God's. yes, I'm going to work on this. So I started working on that, and we were developing stuff, and my style is cartoony, right? Mm-hmm. I'm an animator, right? So can I draw realistic? Sure, I can. How do I like to draw? I like to draw caricatured. Right. I like to draw the Disney style. And so what happened was I was doing sketches and stuff for Mystic, and, I was, turning on my life drawing brain and, doing realistic sketches of Lord Henry Mystic. And we were looking at, can we reuse sculpts from other attractions? Right. We have, at WDI, there's this whole room of head sculpts from like the Hall of Presidents, American Adventure, and they're all plaster busts. And, I was in there and I was like looking at them. At one point I did sketches of like Lord Mystic using, Will Rogers' head from American Adventure. Like nobody knows in Hong Kong Will Rogers is. And if you put a big, cartoony, mustache on him, who the heck is going to know? Right. So that's kind of where we started. And I was doing those sketches, and, there's a whole series of drawings, like, we called them animation sheets, but those animation sheets, they served as like what Mark Davis did on Pirates, right? But they also had to serve like, a technical thing, which is, how many functions does it have, right? How much range of motion does it have? So I would, I'd quickly get to do the Mark Davis thing, right? But not as much as I'd like to, right? Yeah. And then I had to like put on the left, what I had to put on the more serious side of my head and like, do the technical lead drawings, and, so it could be estimated and all that stuff. Right. And, and we did that, for all of Mystic, and, we had figured it out, and it was good. It was a fun show. But then, for some reason, I don't remember what it was, but the entire Hong Kong expansion was put on hold. And so I went away from it. I was like, oh, that's sad. I really wanted to work on the Bears and, Mystic. And I went back to, working for Pixar. I mean, working, I mean, that's the thing. It's like, I'd just finished Potato Head. So I had this nice little break. I'd done Monsters for Tokyo. And then it was like, then I went over and worked on Cars Land for a little bit, which was fun. And, I got to help develop that first Mater, right? That's like driving backwards. And originally he was going to be on like this really big turntable. And then I restaged it. So we still had two figures, but we didn't have like this big giant turntable. And, we came up with the corn stalks that, move. Yeah. Simple. So, again, that was a great, thing, that I liked to do. It's like, how can I design this to actually save money and make it a better show? Mm-hmm. Right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I think we took like $1 million out of this big turntable thing. Like there's like this big piece of show action equipment. And it's like, well, that's not really worth it. Right. Yeah. We can do the same thing and we can do it better. We're still going to have the cost of building the two figures, but we don't need this big piece of show action equipment. So we got rid of that. But how did we get rid of it? We didn't get rid of it by doing some crazy, like, previs and spending, time in meetings. It was me and a couple guys at R&D doing some quick sketches. And then, we did do a previs, but we storyboarded it first, right?
Yeah.
That really, it's how it's always done. You have to have that thought, and you have to, it's a visual medium. And that's what we did, like, on that. And so then I think after that, I was like working on, Tony Baxter and Josh Shipley asked me to animate Mr. Lincoln for Disneyland. And that was the third time I'd animated Lincoln. I had animated Abraham Lincoln for the Road to Gettysburg show, commonly referred to as the Haircut Show. And I loved that show. And then I animated Lincoln for the Hall of Presidents when we added the George W. Bush figure. So I had already done Lincoln, and then, it was like, I get to work with Josh and I get to work with Tony, and we're going to do this expressive head. So I was working on that. And then in the middle of that, I get the call, hey, Hong Kong's back on. Like, okay. And of course I'm super excited. And then I start working too hard, and I'm like animating Lincoln and designing, we're dusting off Mystic Manor and like because it had been shut down for like a year. And, anyhow, so we just got back into it. And, we had a change with the art director, and his name was Mark Shermer, and he and I had worked together closely on Monsters for Tokyo. And, we went through it, and we felt some things weren't working. And, we had like the pitch boards that had the beautiful like artwork on it, right? That's to sell the show, but we didn't have storyboards, right? And to me, there's a big difference between conceptual artwork to sell an attraction and storyboards to tell a story, right?
Yeah.
And, you listen to Mark Davis and those guys talk about Haunted Mansion. They treated it like a film, right? That when that doom buggy turns, it's a camera, right?
Yep.
And so it's like, I'd read that on websites like doombuggy.com. And, so then I was just like, we need to do that with Mystic. So at the very first D23, I was sitting, and during the day I was sitting on display animating Lincoln in our new like digital pipeline. And then when I take breaks, I'd go up to the room at the Hilton that we were all staying in, right? And I would just storyboard Mystic Manor. And so I storyboarded out that entire attraction, and we pinned it all up, and we went through it like you would with a film. And we saw where the holes were, and we saw where things needed to be improved. And one of the, with every attraction, you do what's called value engineering. We'd valued engineered a lot of stuff already at this, before it had been put on hold. And the finale room, right, was originally going to be everything has come to life and it's gone crazy. Well, okay. There's a suit of armor in there. That suit of armor already had like, 8 functions or something in the very first scene. For it to go crazy, I'm going to need 20 functions. That's expensive, right? If you say something like, oh, it's going to go crazy, well, that has a cost. That cost is every single thing in the room is going to have more points of articulation, which just means more and more money. And we had already cut all that stuff. It's like, well, that's not a finale. And we didn't have, I studied, story in school, right? And, what's that, you get your inciting incident, and then you have that climax moment. You have that moment in the story where everything's gone wrong. Your character is done for. And what happened was Mark said the Chinese salon wasn't working. And I agreed it wasn't working, because it's like everything was building and then it kind of just went flat, right? And then we had our VE room where we value engineered everything at the finale. So Keith Gallo and I, who was our interior designer, we sat down in my office after lunch on a Friday, and I was just like, we need to rip the roof off of this place, right? And it was kind of like an offhanded comment, right? That's what it needed. It needed something intense. And Keith was like, oh my gosh, you're right, Ethan. And he's like, yeah, seriously, can we rip the roof off? And what happens in Mystic Manor in that scene, sorry for ruining anybody who hasn't been on it yet or seen it, that wall rips apart and you don't expect it. And that is, to me, that you want unexpected things to happen when you're on a theme park attraction, right? Especially one that you think you know what it's going to be. It's like, oh, I'm in a dark ride vehicle. This is like Winnie the Pooh's Honey Hunt, and I'm just going to go around. I'm going to see funny characters. And, oh, yeah, things are getting bad. There's a guy with a samurai sword over there. No, we ripped the freaking wall off, right? You are going to be destroyed, right? Yeah. And that monkey is almost dead, right?
Yeah.
And so that's, that is, and then we went into the next room and, I cut all the functions out of everything because the music dust has taken over the entire manor. So, we just have the music dust take over that entire room like America Sings. Yeah. and that was, and that's what I said. It's like, America Sings, when you change between the rooms, it's like you had to we could just do that with music dust. And I storyboarded that and showed it to Joe and showed it to Mark. I'm like, yeah, that's what we need to do. And we had Jerry Reese come in and he really did all the media direction and stuff for that wall breaking apart. He added the panda gag, which is super fun. And, that to me, we made something better by cutting things.
Yeah.
But we focused on the story.
Yeah.
And we could, and if we'd have like a project manager or a producer or somebody who didn't understand the creative process, they could have just said no. They could have just said, no, we're not going to do that. That's not what you guys agreed to, 3.5 years ago. Right?
Yeah.
It was, being spontaneous as you can be. But, that entire Hong Kong expansion, I think, turned out great. And people are still talking about Mystic Manor, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. They are.
So,
it's amazing. That's a great story.
Yeah. So a funny thing about that, because I know you asked specifically about the characters, but the characters kind of went the same way, which was Mark had asked me to, think about the design of the monkey. We had a design competition at Imagineering, and all kinds of different artists had come up with different designs for Albert. And, couple of, Joe liked 2 or 3 of them. Mine was one of them. And then Joe said, well, you're doing the character animation sheets. Why don't you you finish the design? You take this from this one and that from that one, and you kind of combine it. So I did. And it was a very different looking monkey than what we know as Albert today. And, Lord Mystic, I think we settled on one of the head sculpts from Spaceship Earth, right? Seriously. And that's what we were going to do. And then Mark, when he asked me to relook at the monkeys and Lord, it was specifically Albert. He said, can you soften Albert's look? He looks he was too scary. He was too realistic. And I had, a sculpt from, the monkeys, which are macaque monkeys, right? From the Jungle Cruise in Florida, right? I had one of those sculpts on my desk, and I used that as reference. And that was, Albert is supposed to be a macaque monkey. And, we met with Animal Kingdom team, right? To talk about, the macaques and all that stuff. We did our homework, as we should. And then, Mark Schirmer had also asked me, he's like, Ethan, can you do some merchandise development drawings? What would you want to see in merchandise? And I had done some stuff like that for Grizzly Gulch. And I had done some stuff like that for Joe on the Joe and sister on the cruise ship. So I was like, yeah, sure, I'll do that. And it was in 2009 when I was working on Lincoln and Anaheim. I took a break from Lincoln. One of the motors had gone out on his face or something. I had to take a break. So instead of, doing the Bill Justice thing and, drawing gremlins on the console, I took out my sketchbook and I started sketching Lord Mystic for a t-shirt or a coffee mug. And, I love stop motion animation. Right. It was probably those tours of Skellington when I was in San Francisco. and I love Rankin Bass, all that stuff, right? So I really wanted to just draw them in that style, right? So I did a drawing of Lord Mystic, and I think The Corpse Bride had just come out, and I was really inspired by the designs in that film. And I think I'd seen Tiki Room. I think Tony and I had gone to Bengal barbecue for dinner the night before, and Tony had never been to Bengal barbecue. And he's like, I've never been to. I'm like, what, Tony? How could you not have gone to barbecue? Indy's right there, right? So he'll probably hate me for sharing that. But we went to Bengal barbecue, and of course, I'm like, I need a break from work, and we're walking through the park at night, and everyone's, oh, look, it's Tony Baxter. I'm like, and he'd stop and talk to the guests. I'm like, I just want food. But anyhow, so I just remember going back to the theater, and I did what the design of Lord Mystic. I drew that, but it was for a T-shirt or a coffee mug. It was for merchandise, right? And I think Tony and I had stopped by Tiki Room on the way back to the theater. And I always was intrigued by the drummers in the Tiki Room. And I always loved the ones that look like crocodiles, but they're not crocodiles. They're monkeys. They have tails.
Huh. Yeah,
they do. They have tails. And I was just like that. And I was just like, oh, that's my monkey. So I drew. I thought of Mark's design of that, drummer monkey looking alligator thing. And there is a sketch out there that I did of that. And that's what I pitched for the merchandise board. And it's like, oh, that'd look cool on a T-shirt. That'd look cool on a coffee mug. And I showed him to Mark, and he's like, oh, that's great. Ethan, put these on a separate board, right? And away from the more realistic ones that you did, right? So I had 2 boards set up in a conference room, and we had Joe Lancicero come by to look at it. Joe walks into the conference room, opens it up, he looks at the wall, and he just zeroes in on that sketch of the, stop motion inspired Lord Mystic and the, Tiki Room monkey inspired Albert. And he's like, I love this. Can we do this?
Wow.
And oh my gosh, I was excited. Mark was like, oh, yeah. I'm the producer too. How do we do this? And we figured it out. And I'll be honest, there was lots of pushback internally at WDI. They're like, this is bold. And it was bold, but it was the right thing to do because as Joe said at the time, every other park, right? And it just any park, right? Dollywood, whoever, they'll do a realistic human, right? With a realistic monkey and, a mustache, and he's an adventurer. Any park can do that, right? We're Disney, right? How do you make this Disney? And the designs that, Joe fell in love with were very Disney feeling, right?
Yeah.
So then it was like, okay, well, if we're doing this, I need to go into the knight, that's holding the helmets, who is named Trader Sam Knight. So everybody knows Sam lives on Disneyland. And he's got 2 heads. And so it's like we pushed everything. And it's like, but I think it's important because you're going through this attraction so quick. You do not know these characters. So everything had to read from a distance, and everything had to be clearly recognizable. A caricature, right?
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah. I appreciate how you went back and forth between telling us about this. I mean, the process, the designing of the characters, kind of the story behind everything. That's just really a great kind of behind the scenes look at Mystic Manor. Thanks for sharing that with us, man. I mean, we could, like Kristen was right. The number of things you've worked on, we could talk about forever. We're not going to keep you forever though. I do want to thank you so much for joining us tonight. I do want to ask you one thing. You had mentioned something about, hey, I might be distracted tonight because I just got an animation desk I'm bringing home. And I'm kind of, you've referenced your, the fact that you actually are an animator, in the way that you work. And I'm just, do you want to, before I let you go, do you want to tell us a little bit about that story?
Yeah, no. So it was back in 2002. I would go to every single Disney life drawing class I could possibly go to. Right. So we used to have 2 life drawings, 2 life drawing classes a day or a week at Imagineering at lunchtime, and then we'd have one in the evening, and then they had them at TV animation and feature animation. I just go to all of them, right, when I could, and it was just great. And I became friends with everybody there. And one of the recruiters from Disney Animation, who always saw me at the classes, and she would come to the Imagineering class. She said, Ethan, they've just they laid off everybody at TV at feature animation at one point. Like they had this huge downsizing, and they were selling off the desks, all the animation desks, and like we're selling them off, and just get some cash, and you can pick one up for a pretty good price. So me and one of my friends who was at Imagineering, we called up this number, and we got to go to the runway building. So it's like this big giant building, like it wasn't too far from Tahunga. And I remember walking in that building, and it was just like stacked floor to ceiling with animation desks. It was so sad, right? Because here I am, I'm a animation student. I love the art form of animation, and it's like it looked like the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark, right? With top people on it, right? And and I just like remember like, oh, these are all people's dreams. So I got my so I picked up my desk, and we had taken one of the flatbed trucks from Tahunga. We borrowed it from because we used to have all kinds of trucks there, so borrowed it from the guy who was in charge of the trucks, and we loaded our desks up, paid our cash, and then I had it like with me at Tahunga, and then it moved with me to 1401, and then it moved with me to the Tokyo building, and then due to COVID, lots of Imagineers got laid off, including myself. But I did, pick up my animation desk today. It's still there, so we're reunited. So I'm very excited.
Oh, that's awesome.
I guess that's the positive that part of the story. So that's good. That's good.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. It is a sad story, but I mean, but honestly, it's like I had the desk for almost 20 years at Disney, right? And it's like people like Bill Justice came by and visited me, and he sat behind my desk there, and he drew Donald Duck on the and it's like Pete Docter hung out in my office. It's like and people like Chris Runco, Joanne Cicero, they all sat down and drew at my desk at some point, and over one of my garbagey drawings or something. So the desk has a lot of memories. I'm glad I got to keep it. I'm glad it didn't disappear in COVID times. So yeah,
that's awesome. It's awesome. Well, Ethan, like I said, thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's been just amazing hearing all these stories. I hope we can get you to come back again and tell us some totally different stories. It'll be like a whole different show. I can tell we could do this probably 20 times.
We didn't talk about Mini Style Studio or Beauty and the Beast in Tokyo. I have a new job at Just Play Toys. They do lots of fun Disney merchandise.
Oh, cool. That's awesome.
Yeah, so they have like this whole line of plush that is, you can get it on Amazon, and it's like vintage. It's like through D23. So they worked with like,
okay.
And it's like, if you've ever been to like Walt's office at the studio, or if you remember it from Disneyland, there was this lady plush that was like on a shelf in Walt's office. Recreated that plush, and you can get it on Amazon. Yeah. It's like super cool. So
totally. Yeah, no, we had Joseph Tatizian on talking about that lady plush. She was like all over that. So yeah. Okay. Yes. Wow. So you're, busy guy.
Yeah.
still busy.
So it's so funny. It's like, I'm not with Disney technically anymore, but I'm still drawing Disney stuff. So it's all good.
Like I said, thanks so much for joining us. Hope we get to talk to you again sometime really soon.
All right. Thanks, guys.
All right. Well, it was great to be able to talk to Ethan and learn about some of his story. And I'd love to be able to have him back and learn more about these other projects that he's been part of. But unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today's show. And as always, we want to thank you for listening. Get your comments and feedback. You can email us at comments@mousetalgia.com or call our toll-free number at 1-888-798-9298 and leave us a voicemail. Follow us on social media at Mousetalgia, or go to mousetalgia.com to learn more about us and to find links to subscribe. And if you want more Mousetalgia in your life, check out mousetalgiaplus.com, where you can help support us and get additional content and even a thank you gift depending on the level you're able to help us out. So check out mousetalgiaplus.com for more information. All right, that's everything. So let's go, Carpe Kingdom. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Mousetalgia is engineered by Dave Braylon and mixed by Jeff Bam. For more information or to get in touch with us, visit mousetalgia.com or email us at comments@mousetalgia.com. Please subscribe to Mousetalgia on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, Google Play, or your favorite podcast app. All sweepstakes entries will be accepted until midnight of Sunday after the Mousetalgia podcast's release date. For more information about our sweepstakes and official rules, go to mousetalgia.com/sweeps. The Mousetalgia podcast is copyright Mousetalgia LLC.
See you real soon.
Mousetalgia.